everybody, and welcome to Lead and Lace. We wanted to kind of chat tonight about a couple different topics, but they're all interlinked and intertwined in a sort of way. In doing this podcast and exploring, what this might look like together, there's been a lot of questions, and people have kind of, given us some really amazing feedback, and we've been very appreciative about the honesty and about all of the candor that we've received. But something that kept kind of triggering for me, some feedback that kept kind of triggering my mind as I was driving to work or working out or just kind of having some downtime, was the same comment of like, well, so if people don't know you, then why would they be interested in listening to you guys? Like if, someone doesn't know Dawn or if someone doesn't know myself, why would they care about what we have to say? And I think I often felt that way when I heard other people were doing podcasts. So I totally can empathize with that mentality. But I think for me, that really resonated once I was sitting in the seat of hosting a podcast, because I was like, well, wait a second. It doesn't really matter if you know me personally or know Dawn personally. If there's interesting dialogue to listen to on your way to work, burning time, or whatever, you might fill those podcast voids with, it shouldn't really matter. And I think then it started kind of to lead me down another path of intrigue, and as far as like people saying things that can sit with you. And I'm one of those people, like if someone says something to me, it like sits with me and I think about it and I reiterate it in my mind. And if it's a positive comment, it goes right out my right ear and I don't ever think about it again. But for some reason, negative feedback, for some reason, for me, whether it's good or healthy or just that negative, tends to really stick. What about you?
Yeah, I think, kind of when we were getting a lot of interest in developing this podcast, one of the questions that kept coming up in my mind was, who's going to listen to it? Who's going to care what we have to say? And really what I had to settle on for myself was, who cares?
Yeah.
If you want to listen. If you don't, that's cool too. Like, no big deal.
Yeah. I mean, you could even say that maybe it's not for everybody else and maybe it's just for us even. And if someone out there finds joy in listening to something that we're doing for each other, then great. And if it builds, great. I think that's the best part about it, is it's genuine and it's not, there's no agenda or narrative behind why we're doing it other than just exploring each other further, exploring topics further together. I think you have a whole lot if people don't know you or haven't been familiarized with you. I think that you have a whole lot to add to me as a human with regards to leadership and counseling me through, being a better employee, being a better manager. There's not a handbook given out as an employee once you've been doing something for 14 years to be a good manager. And to be honest, I don't even know where I would be without having your counseling and your leadership in my career. And so I think you bring that to the table, and then, I'm just a really fucking funny person, so I bring that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I just think that there's things that we bring to, this dialogue that might intrigue somebody, and,
Well, I think it's the same way as we're setting up our side business, which is a promotional product business, and we deal a lot with clothing and materials and what feels better, what will wash better, what will market better. I'm sitting here as a military guy, like, what are we talking about? A t-shirt's a t-shirt, a t-shirt. And being able to dive into your depth of knowledge in what, a 5-ounce shirt versus a 4-ounce shirt and a tri-blend versus 100% polyester. Mm-hmm. And that's such second knowledge for you. And you're able to provide so much value to that part of the business where I'm just a complete blank slate.
Yeah, I think any really healthy relationship they see each other's greatness and build on that. And we also are clairvoyant to each other's weaknesses, which could be bad in times when you aren't jiving or whatever. But I think mostly it's important to help build each other and build our strengths. So, I think that could be relatable to most people. But back to that topic of kind of self-doubt, if you will, of, if someone plants a seed in your head, whether it was negative or not, and how it builds in your mind, it's your control. You ultimately can control if you took that into a negative way and spun it, or if you take that and use that as ammo to drive you to be like, I'll show you, I'll prove you wrong. You could do it two ways. Or you could take it and throw it away and do whatever you want with it, dispose of it right away. And that's something that I work on all the time because I'm not great at doing that. I'm not great at taking something and just tossing it by the wayside. Typically, if I hear feedback, like I said, I sit on it, think about it. And maybe that makes me weaker in some cases, but also I think maybe it makes me stronger because I'm, trying to better myself. If someone's giving me some sort of feedback, I'm typically trying to figure out the solve. But it's interesting because that kind of leads into so many other things.
Well, I think the root question that we were kind of getting at when we were exploring this whole podcast thing is if people don't know your credentials, then why should they listen to you? Or even beyond this podcast and at work, if they don't know your credentials, it almost invalidates you.
Yeah.
And so you could be a world-renowned painter selling stuff on the street corner, but if they don't know...
yeah, like the Banksy thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
for those of you who don't know that, Banksy, he gave a bunch of his real paintings. They weren't prints. They were paintings, right? Or were they copies of his prints?
They were real paintings.
Yeah.
And he was selling them on the street corner for $60 a piece.
Yeah.
And it was kind of this social test.
It was a social experiment, yeah.
Of would people buy it if they didn't know it was Banksy?
Yeah, and I think he only sold 7 all day.
And he sold... But, I mean, obviously those guys landed them, and now they're worth millions and all that good stuff. Well, yeah, he personally
wrote them an email, and I think one guy sold one for $1.4 million or something silly, $60, and it turned it into $1.4 million overnight. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example of hey, just because you say somebody's a celebrity, what makes them a celebrity? Or just because you say somebody is a famous painter... Like that guy who put the banana on the wall and all of a sudden it was this big deal. And really that validation of well, because other people said so, therefore you are. So I think that's intriguing to me because in career, to bring it back to career field, I've been told things in my career oh, well, for example, in school, I was told, okay, well, you're not the best hand sketcher. So why don't you focus on the computer? And then I never really dove into exploring that because I just was told I wasn't good at that. So I was okay, cool. I'll just do what I'm good at. And then, as I got into my career path, I was told, well, you're super good at merchandising because you're very smart with math and you're a very left brain thinker. So why don't you just be a merchandiser? And so my first job interview at Roxy, I was yeah, I'm here to interview for a merchandising position. And they're but you have all this design experience in college and it looks like you want to be a designer. You got a design degree. Why are you here interviewing as a merchant? And I said, oh, well, because that's what I was told I was really great at. And my boss at the time, interviewing me was don't you ever let somebody tell you what you're good at or what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about something, you follow that dream all the way down and never stop and see where it takes you. And for me, I think that's kind of the narrative of that, negative thoughts. And I grew up in kind of a negative household, not being told every day, you're amazing, you're a princess. That was never something that was told to me when I was growing up. It was very much real talk. You better get, better grades and we can't afford all these colleges, like you have to do like a realistic conversation was always had in my household. I was never like falsely pumped up. And so I think that kind of has have a tendency to be like a vacuum of energy for me. Like I absorb that energy really quickly, and I have a hard time of like releasing that energy and then thinking positively and sticking with what I'm passionate about. What about you?
Yeah, I think self-doubt is, it's a huge part of any job, especially in a job that is so high stakes, when it's up to you to make a call, and that call could be life or death. I mean, there's a lot of training that goes into it kind of to train that self-doubt out.
Oh, interesting.
But at the same time,
explain that. Like, how could you train self-doubt out of your brain?
Well, it's essentially you're training to trust yourself, and you're training to trust your gear and to trust what you know and to trust the facts.
Partner, yeah.
And because when it comes down to it and you need to make that decision, you need to make it based on the facts and not necessarily the emotion.
Yeah.
And so
how do you do that though? Like can you just like break that down for me? Like how do you train somebody to make a decision based on facts and not emotion?
Well, sure. So when I was coming up in the military, it was kind of one of those things where they threw in training, it was the worst case scenarios all the time in training. So you never got to start up this like stair step, like, let's ease into it. No, you walked into a nuclear disaster and everybody was just Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And it was... So
then when you go into a normal setting that has like mediocre level stress, you're like, fuck, this is a cakewalk because I just dealt with mayhem.
Well, yeah. So essentially you walk into the first one, you just get pounded. And you're like, what just happened? I don't even know how to process how bad that is. And then you kind of understand...
What do you mean, pounded, and how bad that is?
Well... What I mean is like
paintballs or
no. What I mean is just like the situation is so mentally taxing, physically taxing.
Okay.
There's so many decisions and so many different angles that you aren't really prepared for. You think you're just going to go into the situation and it's going to be
someone's going to help you.
I'm going to choose left or right, and it's not like that.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy.
Yeah.
And so when you get all of those angles thrown at you and you're like, I was not prepared for that.
Yeah.
That was so bad.
I was so bad.
And so you go into the next one and you kind of like, that becomes your bar. And you're like,
sure.
Well, I know I'm going to go in. And so I'm going to go in and I'm going to do my best.
Yeah.
Like I know that this happened last time, and you start to put all of those things in your toolbox.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, I know this is all going to happen. And so yeah. I mean, meanwhile, you're still like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get fired.
Yeah.
This is going to be the one.
You're always stressing.
This is the one where I'm going to make the wrong call. I'm going to let somebody down. I'm going to get somebody killed, whatever the case is. And you're thinking that. But like I said, in one of the other conversations that we had, it's kind of like you load that door on the airplane. And once you jump out, you can't get back in the airplane. And so you kind of just have to suppress all of that emotion, that self-doubt, even though you may feel it.
Do you have techniques of suppressing it, or like what are your techniques?
Yeah, it's like in a jar and you just stuff it as far down as possible.
You visualize?
You put the lid on it and you just, I don't know. I mean, a lot of times there's no room. Well, let me put it this way. In high stress situations, there's no room for that. Like you just don't have the time for that. And if you do, you're just not
capable.
You're just not in that job anymore.
Right.
You get moved to a job where there's not that impactful of situations.
But in the beginning, what techniques did you use?
Fake it till you make it.
Okay.
So
you're scared shitless.
Oh,
but
yeah.
You
just fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
But
you didn't have like a counting technique or like a visualization technique or any. There's no technique. It was just like, get through this shit. And then I think we talked about this. Like, it's a very different analogy, but we did talk about this recently because we went snowboarding and we were on the chairlift, and I remember saying to you, like, I got good at snowboarding just because my friend made me go down like a blue or I think it was a blue square or whatever, and those like for those of you listening who don't know what that is, but it was fairly difficult for my very first run, and I fell all the way down. But ever since then, I was like, oh, well, this is all easy. I know I've already done that, so now everything else is easy. And I always approach snowboarding that way, where I was like, okay, well, this little jump, or I would go like over the big jump, and then I'd be like, okay, this little jump is nothing, and like everything just kind of seemed less than.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that. But I mean, not everything is like that, right? Not everything in the military is a life or death situation. Not everything is imperative, and there's a lot of self-doubt into the little things, like, am I leading these people correctly? Like, am I making the right decisions? Am I, do people like me? Is the choice I'm making for the direction of this program or this group of people the right direction? And
am I doing the right thing? Yeah.
Sometimes
these are people's livelihood too, and lives. It's not just like a product.
Yeah. And, sometimes you have to just kind of go through the planning process. And if you plan correctly, and you still have self-doubt, then you're probably wrong. You're probably right to doubt yourself.
Interesting. That's a good theory. So you're saying, like, if you've done everything right in planning and you're still doubting your decision, then you probably made the wrong decision.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you have to trust your gut.
Yeah.
Gut,
so that's such an important topic. Like, gut is such a overshot importance in everything you do. Like, my gut instinct is spot on in a lot of things: relationships, friendships, work. 90% of my skill set is gut. People are always like, well, how do you find like the latest, hottest fashion? I'm like, I don't. I just know. Like, I know right away when something's not good or when something's not, is great. And you can't even explain that, and you can't teach that. And I've had a lot of employees that have come underneath me, and I'm like, you got it, you don't.
Sure.
And it's really difficult because I feel so in some ways maybe I failed them because I'm like, I just couldn't teach them that.
Yeah.
But
I think there's a really big difference between that gut instinct of like, oh, I don't know, and self-doubt, I don't know, because one is you've prepared yourself to have the correct gut instinct.
Yeah, or you've had enough experience, you've had enough life experiences.
And one is like when you
confidence.
Have it's either tied to confidence, which is generally tied to your ability to prepare for the situation. If you are a soccer player and you practice day after day after day after day, and you go to the game, you're probably not really doubting yourself so much because you've really prepared.
Yeah, you feel good about it.
If you showed up to the team and they're like, hey, by the way, you're playing the All-Stars.
Like, I've only played T-ball my whole life.
Right. And so you're probably going to doubt yourself a lot.
For sure.
And so that's
they're like, what the fuck? I thought this was football. They're like, yes, it is.
And so that's really, that's kind of the angle that we take when we're training our guys, or when, you're leading any group of people, is punch all of the holes that you can through whatever idea you have. You do it first. Answer all of the hard questions.
So that's a technique right there.
Yeah. Go into, like, if you're going to go to the meeting and you're going to make a pitch, ask all of the questions that they're going to ask, or
absolutely,
or all of the ones that you're like, oh man, I hope he doesn't ask this one.
Yeah.
Because if you have the answers for that before you go in there, you're good.
No, yeah, you so nailed it. Every pitch I've ever done, I've devil's advocated the fuck out of it before I go in, and 9 times out of 10 they've been successful due to that. There's all these rogue scenarios like, oh, well, vendor B underpitched you by $5. I can't control that. But outside of that, like, just design elements and just like the narrative of, the why, if I can punch all the holes, like you said, before I go in, typically I have good meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
I've had some very bad ones, to your point. Like, that's the thing, like, part of experience is like, I had to have some shitty ones before. Like, I've had some where, I'm not going to name any names, but I have a male leader And he would like walk into the room and be like, what the hell is this shit? And like rip designs off the wall and be like, what the fuck were you thinking? And you're like, well, I thought I was thinking this, but now I have no idea. And talk about self-doubt. Going into the next pitch after you had that happen to you is like, holy shit, like, where do I go from here? I don't even know where to start. And I would cry and be so upset. But a lot of that was like maturity as well. And it was also poor leadership from my boss, my direct manager, for like setting me up for a disastrous meeting like that.
Yeah, I remember
one time she was like, wow, you can take a fucking punch.
Yeah, I think one of the best, mentorship pieces that I got to that was on one of my deployments. One of the best officers I've ever worked for. We kind of only had one chance to pitch some of the ideas that we had or the thoughts. And we would sit there and we do that for days as we're building this plan of what we're going to do. And we would just, throw every dart through it that we could. And when we got up, they're like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's just do that. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
It was that
easy. Yeah.
And obviously it's not that easy, right? It wasn't the pitch that got him. It was the confidence in which we showed up. It was the facts that we had. It was the fact that
any question
in the slides that we sent them before the meeting, we had already answered every question that they had.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And so
that's a great technique. When I asked you earlier and you said, I don't really have a technique. Well, yeah, you do. You have a ton of them. I just think maybe articulating what they were.
Yeah, I guess it's not really, when I think of self-doubt, it's more of kind of like a personal thing in the moment. And it's not like I'm going to count to 10 and take a deep breath and then I'll feel better about myself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times when you just got to send it.
Yeah, for sure.
Ultimately, if you act in good faith, like you're trying to do right when you're doing things, you're prepared for them as best you can. Sometimes you just gotta send it.
Yeah, I always like what you say to me too. You always say if you operate above the line, then you shouldn't have any self-doubt. You shouldn't have any questions about what you're doing, because in the end, that's always the right thing. So that also helps build your confidence, knowing like this is the right thing to do. I know this is the right thing to do, and here's why. So, but yeah, I think outside of career, outside of being in a stressful scenario in your career, having self-doubt around new adventures that are completely existential from what you do on a day-to-day, they're easy or easier to have. And then having someone plant that seed of doubt, it's a lot easier to question when...
What do you mean?
Like this podcast. Like this isn't something we've done, over the last 35 years. It's something we just picked up and started doing. And so when people are like, questioning it or questioning why we're doing it or questioning if people are going to give a damn about what we have to say, there's like, you're kind of like, yeah, they're right. Like, at least that's what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, they're probably right. Like, what a waste of time. We should probably not do this. But then I'm like, wait, why am I letting that drive my, reasoning for doing it down when it really should be amplifying the need to prove otherwise, Yeah,
obviously I think a lot of that has come with age. And, the older you get, the more self-assured you become.
Yeah,
or the less,
maturity,
you don't really care what everybody else thinks about. And,
people say that, but I think ultimately, like I said earlier, there's things that regardless of what someone says, there's something in my brain, maybe not in your brain, but something in my brain that makes it very difficult for me to release comments that are negative. And I think that's a personality trait. Like I will work on that. And as I've gotten older, it's gotten a little easier, but it's still really hard for me. My twin sister has the same thing. We always share this with each other. Like, why is it so hard for us to just let it fucking go? And I've used visualization techniques where, like, one time I heard someone say, like, just picture it as like water and your oil, and it just like beads off your back. And that worked for a short bit, but then it just kind of like sinks back in, and I still have to, like, it's like a battlefield in my brain. I'm like trying to always try and keep a positive attitude, try and keep a positive mental state. We've talked about this before in our marriage, because it is very easy for me to kind of sink into the pessimistic side of my personality, being raised as a realist, and that kind of, feeds into the topic of you being an idealist and me being a realist. And sometimes like you're very optimistic and encouraging and idealized about certain things, where I'm very much actualized and have like this level setting realism that can tend to feel negative. But really it's just me kind of being like, but if that, then this,
Sure. And I have a lot of flaws to my system, but one of the things that I was explaining to one of the new students was, I'm an instructor in the military, and so when I refer to my students, they're guys coming through the classes. A big difference between when you're in your 20s is you go to the bar to meet friends.
Yeah.
When you're in your 30s, you bring your friends to the bar. and so I have a no new friend policy. And I don't mean
at
that
the bar or at work.
No, I mean kind of like
I respect it if it's at the bar.
Kind of like in a public setting in general. Like I'm not going to places to meet friends.
Yeah,
I'm bringing my friends to the party.
It's so interesting. We just talked about this the other day for me as well at work, because I basically had a couple scenarios where I was like backstabbed a little bit, and I'm like, fuck these people. I'm not making friends anymore. I'm not going to lunch with people. I'm not sharing with people. And it was a peer-to-peer situation. It wasn't like a peer to subordinate fraternization situation. And but it made me like really isolated. And you were like, you shouldn't feel that way. You should want to make friends. So,
well, what I do think, and again, there's flaws to the system, but I'm not saying that I close myself off to the opportunity for new friends. That's not what I'm saying. Like, okay. I am, if we go to a place and somebody's there and they're nice, great. Like, cool.
Yeah.
Come hang out, whatever. But when you're 20, you're going to the bar to meet a new group of people, to expand your social network, all of that stuff.
You're there to meet females. They're really not there to meet.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But what I've found is that I have such a good and tight friendship with the friends that I have.
Yeah, you do.
That I don't have time for the half friends.
Yeah, no, I can certainly empathize with you on that. I think in being your wife, you've made my friends look interesting as far as loyalty. Like, don't get me wrong, I have some amazing friends. I'm not saying all my friends, but I'm saying a lot of my friends in college that I am maybe friends with like 2 of them, and I was friends with like 45 fucking people, right? So like growing older with you, you've made me realize like, whoa, this is what a friendship looks like. And in some circumstances, I've realized, and this is part of maturing as well, that some of those people don't suit me. And for whatever reason that is, I've grown away from a lot of those people, where like I often hear people say like, oh, like all my college buddies are going to get back together. And I'm like, man, that'd be nice to have that crew back together.
Yeah. But
at the same time, there's like been all of these things, and all this time passed and realizations that I'm like, And I don't get me wrong. Like I said, I have some great friends from college still that I keep in touch with, but there's definitely been, later in life, some new friendships that have blossomed. And I always like get sad because being in the military, you have some amazing friends, and therefore you have some amazing wives that I become best friends with or really close with, and they move, and it bums me out. And I always get sad, but then like,
love you, Kim Summers.
Kim, shout out. You better fucking listen to this podcast, bitches.
But I think
anyways,
no. I totally get what you're saying.
Mark and Rachel.
When
Shady and Jen. See, a lot of them fucking moved. No, I have like 20 more.
Yeah, I think
John Chetzer.
One of the key events that really broke it out for me of what a good friend is that time when we were coming back from Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
And our flight was delayed.
Yeah.
And my sister was supposed to pick us up.
Yeah.
And because it was delayed, she had to go to work, and we didn't have anybody to come get us.
And we were flying into LA, and we live in San Diego.
And it was
San
just
Diego
like
proper. Like, we lived in Chula.
And so we went through the list of, so-called friends.
Yeah.
And it was like,
I called like 30 people. Yeah.
No, I can't. Oh,
Everybody
that's too
in
far.
my
LAX
phone
is
book
too far.
said no.
And so I call my best friend.
Yeah.
John Chad Garfunkel.
The John Chad Garfunkel.
And I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm 3.5 hours away.
Yeah.
I know you're on a first date, but I'm stranded, man.
It wasn't really a first date. It was like a second or third date.
No, it was legit a first date.
We met her at...
Remember in my story?
We met her at Kings of Leon, and then he went out with her.
That's not a date. They met there.
Whatevs.
Jesus.
Okay, first date.
So anyways.
It's better for the story.
He was like, hey, I'm going to pick my friend up. Come on. So she went with them. They picked us up at LAX, dropped us off in Huntington Beach. And then they went back to doing whatever they were doing. So that for me was like, are you kidding me? You would drive 3.5 hours at the drop of a hat.
For sure.
For you,
how do you think I felt about that?
Yeah.
I was like so profoundly shocked and forever changed my opinion of like what a real friend is. Your dad's like that too. Your dad's like one of those people that will just like drop everything and do for you. And you have to have some of those people in your back pocket. Like there's like these guys or gals that will just drop whatever and just loyal as fuck and fly across the state or fly across the country rather if you needed them. You have so many of those types of friends. You are so fucking lucky.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is when in my no new friend policy, it's just a hard group to break into.
It is because
you have to measure up to all of these people.
Yeah, but I mean, don't you think a lot of that has to do with just having to really like ride or die with each other? Like there was a lot of circumstances you guys have been put in that were high stress, and when you're rubbing elbows with these guys, it's not just like, oh, hey, can you staple my booklet and file this paperwork? It's like, oh, hey, we have to actually like go and endure this high stress situation together, which builds a bond that's unbreakable.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a lot of that is built in suffering or being put in the mindset of understanding the stakes and with like-minded people. And so you get into just a mindset in which you're able to build a bond with that type of person. Whereas, if you're working in the corporate environment, you have work friends and you have non-work friends.
Maybe I should bring my team to your command and run them through the course and have them have some team building exercises, bonding exercises.
Yeah, that would be pretty funny.
Yeah, they would last like 10 minutes.
They'd be like, this cloth is so scratchy.
Yeah,
you have to wear these all the time?
Sack. It doesn't match my sneakers. Anyways, yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting thing about your friends and about your command and in general. I don't think a lot of people in the private sector have that type of bond, and I think that's probably going to be one of the hardest things to leave. It's not going to be the day-to-day. It's going to be the people that you're, around, or the people that you've surrounded yourself with. That's got to be like fucking devastating when you leave, because you're like, whoa, I just lost my brothers, my brotherhood and sisters, depending on how close you are with some of the females. But that's got to be one of the hardest things, I think, to break out of. Sure.
I mean, it was a big shock to the system when I left the operational command to go to an instructor role, just because it's like
devastating.
You're still in the club, but you're not. But you're just like a dad in the club, and they're like, I just want to do hood ratchet with my friends, and you just want to kind of
even I kind of feel like that. Like even we just don't do as many group things together as families, and even just, Saturday we had this amazing party and we had a lot of people over, but I still kind of always feel like we're like outsiders looking in now. I don't really feel like we're in it anymore. So yeah, I even kind of miss it. Yeah,
it's just part of growing up. I mean,
yeah, but I think back on like those
it's like
times.
looking at the 20-year-olds and be like, oh, why don't we do that anymore? And you're like, oh yeah, I got responsibilities and shit.
Yeah, but so what do we do as 30-year-olds that make us our 40-year-old self miss this? That's what you gotta like think about, you know?
Well, I mean, I still think that we are very active and have a good time.
I know, but I just think back on like going to the bar with all of our crew and like dancing. I just want to dance and like all that stuff with Chambo and yeah. Anyways, we had some good times.
Yeah.
But now it's time to make some new good times. They could be jealous of them. We're 40.
Well, I think that's kind of one of the good things about being in your 30s is that you're setting the rest of your life up and you're setting the foundation up and you're that's true.
You're
settling into your houses.
Kind of blows because you're broke.
You're settling. You're starting to make some money.
Yeah.
You're settling into your house. You have kids. You're getting to raise them. You're getting to experience life through that. And I mean, let's be real. That is so much better.
Yeah.
Than going to the bar, is getting to hang out with your kids and watch them experience things for the first time.
Dude, I was looking up at Merrick's little bookshelf. Well, first of all, Merrick was like tripping out tonight because he was like, I'm not reading yet, and everybody else is reading and in kindergarten. I'm like, but you're in TK, and he's like, yeah, but everybody's reading in kindergarten, and I can't read. And I'm like, but you're in TK, bro. Like, chill. So I love that he's ambitious and that he's like super into school, but. Anyways, I was looking up at his little bookshelf as he was reading his little Bob books, and I was like, oh my God, he's got like this little duck crown that he made and a little froggy crown. And I'm like, oh my God, like in 2 years, he's going to be like, whatever, Mom. You know what I mean? He's not going to be wearing a duck crown leaving school. Yeah. He's going to be like, don't kiss me, Mom. You're embarrassing me.
Yeah, that's probably pretty likely.
Yeah. So it's like so short-lived. It's such a blink, and everybody always says that. But like just pausing and looking at that little crown made me be like, okay, absorb every second of reading this book to him right now. You know what I mean? Like those little like pregnant pauses that are put in your life to like slow you down and kind of go, oh, wait a second. This too shall pass, and it'll pass fast.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. But I think this is a good spot to wrap it up.
I think so too. I'm pretty fatigué.
And I think that we covered some good conversation today. And I think that the self-doubt portion or conversation that we had it's one that plagues everybody, right? Everybody has a piece of self-doubt. Everybody is... And if you don't, you're a complete narcissist, and you probably should have way more self-doubt than you don't.
Even those people do. And that's what the narcissism's derived from, probably.
Sure, of course. But at the heart of it all, it's kind of... the more that you train yourself for the situation that you're doubting yourself about, the more that you kind of...
Prepare yourself to...
I
like what you said, like poke holes in it before anyone else has a chance to.
Yeah, or sometimes you just have to get the courage to just send it.
Yeah.
And, you know, because if it's not something that you can really prepare yourself, it's not a brief, it's not a game or a thing that you have to go to, and it's just a decision you have to make in your life, like... having a podcast. That's obviously there's no consequence to this. Yeah. And so
I mean, it could be advantageous for just us, or it could be advantageous for a crowd or a collective, or not. Who knows? Like there's really no agenda. I think that's the theory and the mantra of the topic was like, sometimes it doesn't have to matter to anybody to matter to me or to matter to you. And I think that's the best part about being a free thinker and being confident and being a leader, that, like you said, you don't give a shit what people think or how people view you, or, whether or not someone gets something out of something. Like, not my problem, bruh.
Yeah. But with that, we do hope you enjoy our podcast, and we hope that you that we can continue to give you valuable content and at least kill some time for you.
Click, like, share
on the way to work. So we'd love to hear your feedback. Leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to this on.
Don't say any negative comments or I'll find you in your
Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Yeah.
Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.